Welcome everybody to Season 4, Episode 1 of the weekly Quantum World Detangled. I am joined by my friend and sponsor Denise Ruffner from IonQ.
Hi everyone, Denise Ruffner coming to you from Southern California on a beautiful, as you can see out the window, holiday weekend. It's Memorial Day in the US on Monday. So most of us have a long weekend and I am working, but that's okay. And we're happy today to be joined by Stephanie Simmons. So hi. Stephanie, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. Hi. So I'm founder and chief quantum officer of Photonic, Inc. I am also a professor here at Simon Fraser University. I've been doing quantum, it feels like, for a very long time. I am joining you here today on a sunny Vancouver day. Not a long weekend here. That was just recent. So,
Stephanie, is that a poinsettia behind you?
It is. Yeah. So I'm taking it as a personal challenge to make it cool again. To wait till it comes back, because it's surviving. I'm really happy with it. Yeah, no, I like plants.
You're good with plants. If you can have a poinsettia last for 6 months after Christmas, that's pretty amazing.
Right? I'm taking it as a challenge now.
Great challenge. Well, I'll have to check in with you later in the year and see how it's doing. So, André?
And other than plants, you're a little bit into quantum. Would love to find out how you got there, where you're from, what your journey has been from a little girl to where you are now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's a bit of a unconventional story in that it's kind of boring and straightforward almost. So when I was 16, I was living in Kitchener-Waterloo, the same city. And there was a little blurb in the newspaper saying that the Institute for Quantum Computing was being formed. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. I thought it was just, the idea of quantum computing just sounded too cool to turn down. And basically I've been hooked since. And where I would say it's anomalous, if anything, is that I think a lot of people have a hook that gets them into STEM. And most people just have their thinking evolve over time. And just mine hasn't. Mine has just remained, like, I was exposed to a bunch of other stuff at Waterloo, but quantum computing still sounds like the coolest thing. And to this day, it definitely gets me up in the morning. It's gonna be fun once it really, really unleashes. Yeah, so I got Nielsen and Schwang for my Christmas present when I was 16. And I loved it. I didn't understand any of it, and I thought it was amazing. And went to Waterloo, IQC. I knocked on Michele Mosca's door the first week I was an undergrad, and I said, okay, how do I get into quantum computing? And he said, get a math degree. So I switched from computing science. I took him at his word. I switched from computing science into math. I got a pure math degree. And I did a bunch of terms at IQC, and I got to play with a bunch of systems. And it was just great. It was just a wonderful learning opportunity across the board. And then by the end of my undergrad, it became evident that there wasn't going to be a working quantum computer at scale that I could program yet. So I was going to have to go and work on it myself. So I switched into hardware, as it were. I went to material science at Oxford and then eventually to electrical engineering at UNSW. So I've kind of been around. And here at Simon Fraser University, I'm in physics for the first time in my whole career. Yeah, so I worked on a bunch of different kinds of qubits when I was at Oxford, but then focused quite a bit on silicon spin qubits. My instinct being that, it was probably good. If you can get it to work with silicon spin qubits, it would probably be the winning horse. And that's why I went to UNSW in 2014, while I was setting up the lab here at SFU. To do something a little bit different with silicon spins. So that's the trajectory.
It's a long and focused trajectory.
It is. It's kind of boring. It's kind of boring, but it's yeah.
Wait a minute, but I have to talk about my favorite tweet from the quantum bullshit detector. And that's where he refers to the quantum computing, he or she refers to it as the quantum computing horse race.
Yeah.
and says some of the horses are horses and some of them are goats, but we just don't know which is which. So I love that you describe this as a horse race.
It very much is, and you're absolutely right. You can claim the similar line I like to use is like a popsicle can be a qubit. It's just a really bad one, right? And you know, it's very, very fun to see how much it's changed, right? Like, so I tried to read everything that existed in the quantum space as it was coming out in the late 2008, 2009 when I started my DPhil. It was possible. It was possible to stay on top of everything. And now there's like, it's not even possible to stay on top of all the ion trap papers that are coming out anymore. You know, like it's just completely different now. So it's really fun to see. And we're only just getting started when you think about it. The
quantum bullshit detector hasn't tweeted in a little while. Somebody else that hasn't tweeted in a little while is Stephanie Simmons. Yeah. In an effort to get to know you a little bit, had to dig back into 2016, 2017. And one of your last tweets was that there's no free will, or rather that free will is tied to the measurement problem of quantum mechanics. So, Stephanie, are you here out of free will, or are we not?
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with social media. Every couple of years, I'm like, oh, I should really do this. So it definitely feels like a chore for me. Yeah, no, that was you're fun to have dug that up. How would I position it? Yeah, I mean, it is plausible, right? It is definitely one of the interpretations of quantum mechanics to imagine a super deterministic framework where the outcomes, kind of like a standing wave, right? Where you have, you know, initialization conditions and final conditions, and that the quantum wave function actually is kind of undergoing this trajectory in a super deterministic way. I'm not opposed to it anymore. You know, my younger self would be aghast. Would be like, oh my gosh, really? And I used to trivialize people that interpreted it this way, but really that's the only place where free will could hide, right? Is in the quantum measurement problem. And so yeah, I guess I took a stand. I didn't remember that I posted that. So yeah, thanks. It feels kind of private now to have that out on the whole website, but okay, it is what it is. I'm not convinced that it's the only interpretation of quantum mechanics that makes sense, but I totally think it stands to be considered, just on par with some of the other interpretations of quantum mechanics. And yeah, I've actually come to terms with it now. I think it makes sense in some way, in a kind of a weird way, in the same way that multiverse makes sense to some people. So it is what it is.
Believing in many worlds definitely makes my life more bearable. So
does it?
I'm a go. Something else that you probably don't remember but tweeted in 2016 is that we should abolish all community type of events, in parentheses, the church, and replace it with public educational events.
Oh, so I think
something.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I should now what you're telling me is I need to delete my Twitter.
Or start tweeting again. But we're a little bit in the educational business, putting faces.
Oh, okay. No. So I think where my headspace was, if I were to try and replay where my headspace was on that, was that there is a real need for something like churches in terms of social development, right? Like there's a really good place for a weekly or semi-regular discussion of ethics. I think there's absolutely a place for that. And I think there should be an equally strong non-religious option for those kinds of discussions, right? Like I think there would be benefit to having active community conversations about how best to behave as a society, and individuals, and the rest of it, without that, like the big brother religious side to it. I'd say there's just an opportunity there that we just haven't built up, and I don't know if we're going to be able to. But I did see it dovetailing in with kind of ongoing learning as a reframing in the way that we think about adulthood. There's a lot of people that, you know, I think it's kind of a misleading thing to think you hit 30 and then you're doing your thing. Like I think if we made education part of a whole life process and in a very active way, it could serve that dual role. Like you can anyway. Sorry. Yeah, that was my headspace. I have no idea how it was communicated in however many years ago.
I kind of want to ask you about the quantum brain now, but you didn't tweet about that, so we'll leave the spooky part of. Yeah, we'll leave the spooky part of quantum and go to the hardware part of quantum to find out more about photonic ink. Denise, your turn.
Okay, well, I'm going to first digress and say that, you know, like we all know the words to so many songs.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't songs more educational? Or, you know, like there's different ways to educate, but I just laugh because, you know, I could know physics better, but I know all the songs. And so I don't know. I always think we do need more education, and we do need to find new ways to educate. So I don't know if we're going to have a new quantum rock and roll band or not, but
yeah, that's hilarious. I have my children singing our address, right? Like absolutely, songs are a way to internalize information. So that's how you do it for sure.
Yeah. So singing your address, that's really cute. So you are a professor at Simon Fraser University as well as involved in a startup.
Mm-hmm.
So I know your startup started in 2016. So I'm thinking you're doing this part-time, or can you tell us a little bit about it and maybe how big the group is?
Yeah, it's growing. It's big and growing fast. It did start in a few years ago when we thought we were onto something, but we still had to kind of prove it out a little bit in the lab. And we've done so. We've proved it out enough to really press the go button on the company side. So now both sides of the fence are growing, but it is basically one team and two kinds of hats. So there's a lot of like back and forth between the two. It is all kind of one community. So I could maybe put numbers to both of them, but it changes weekly. So it's a lot of fun right now.
That's great. And I saw you also have some very significant funding. You got a grant in 2017, and I think also some private funding potentially, but true?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
And I also started looking around your lab, which is pretty large, and that you're looking for students, masters, PhD, postdocs. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I get so many notes from people saying, oh my God, I'm looking for a lab, or where could I go? And it's kind of hard for how people find places to go. And so maybe you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, how do you acquire talent? There's just so much to do, right? There's just always so much to do, and we have opportunities for all kinds of high caliber people. But the thing that we have as a unique position for the moment is the ability to launch people on an academic footing or within a corporate footing, which I quite like. Like there are people that want to succeed on one side of that fence, and they're pretty clear about it. And there's roles for everybody to contribute to what we're all trying to build, really, because this is like a floating all boats kind of situation, right? If we get something that is unleashed at scale, then everyone benefits. So, yeah.
That's great. That's great. I know a lot of people out there are always looking around, and so thank you for that.
Yeah.
I know your company is a little bit in stealth mode, and so I don't want to ask anything.
You can ask whatever you want. I'll just tell you what I can.
Tell me. No, sorry.
Yeah,
But basically you say it's growing a lot. Can you tell us how many people you have, or a relative, or any descriptor?
Well, okay, we have a lot of, maybe you can just infer from the kinds of jobs that we have posted, and how many are being filled, and the rest. It's growing fast.
Okay, and what is your website?
Photonic.com.
So it's so funny because it's actually kind of hard to look up photonic.com. I got a lot of, mixed stuff in Google, and I was like poking around. So photonic.com is their company website, and everybody can see Stephanie on the faculty of Simon Fraser University.
Yeah.
So that's another good place to find her. Can you talk anything about the timeline for your product or use cases, or?
Let me maybe just so we do have archive papers on this, and so I think from a safe point of view, I can just kind of couch it in the bare capabilities of what our technology is, where it's going for, and what its motivations are, right? So if you don't mind, I'll maybe answer your question. I'm going to go back to kind of the real professorial side and be like, this is the sort of thing we are working with, and then maybe leave it to the audience to believe or not the kinds of things that this can do. So the motivations that we've had are so I'm young enough in this career that I wanted to still be working on a technology that I thought could form the basis of the quantum network that will exist in 20, 30 years, right? Like clearly we're in a very nascent stage and everything's changing, right? Every year, everything's changing like a huge amount. And even there's been breakthrough after breakthrough and all sorts of this. And so I had to kind of, from a wayfinding perspective, choose a technology that had the following axioms. And these axioms could be wrong, but these were my axioms that I picked, right? So I assumed that the large scale technology, that first computation and networking is going to be the same thing, right? That the networking of quantum systems is going to be even more important than the networking of classical systems. So that basically photons are going to be part of the solution in a very built-in way, and telecom photons specifically. So telecoms is going to be part of it. The other part is silicon. If you can get it to work in silicon, you win usually. And that's again an axiom, but whatever it is, what it is. That's for more than one reason. Of course, it's not just for commercial reasons. It's because, you know, silicon broke world records in terms of lifetimes and all the rest of it, right? In terms of the material that we know how to make most perfect is like a physical material, silicon just takes the cake, right? Because of the float zone process in the semiconductor industry. Okay, so it has quantum benefits, it has commercial benefits. So silicon, telecom, and memory. I'm just going to make the assertion that memory is going to be part of the solution in some form. And again, all of these axioms could be wrong, but these are the axioms that have navigated my career. And so that's the technology that we have, is we have a spin that talks well with telecom photons in silicon, and we're off to the races.
That's great. That's great.
Sorry for the sales pitch.
No, it's not a sales pitch. It's educational, because there's so many different modalities for quantum computing and so many different approaches. And at this time, I do want to poke fun at André for having a superconducting background when IonQ is the sponsor, and I wonder why it's not a trapped ion background. So I've got or the silicon background like Stephanie, right? Come on. But there are a lot of different modalities and a lot of different approaches. And we can go back to the horse race analogy that was just at the beginning of the horse race, and it's going to be a long horse race. You know, I guess what I do want to ask you is there's a lot of hype in quantum. And I kind of appreciate that you're being stealthy, because I think you're trying to avoid hype, which I applaud. But I'm wondering kind of if you have a point of view on hype, or on how the audience should be thinking and talking about quantum in terms of timing, et cetera.
I think people are very inventive. So to your horse race point, I don't think there will be, I think there will be a dominant design. If you go to take a look at how industries change, there's often a proliferation of startups, things leave academia, there's a mass exodus, there's a talent scramble. There is eventually a coalescence around a dominant design, and this is where the industry is really born. And we haven't had that time yet. And the horse race will be around that kind of narrative. But what I mean by, but I don't want to be too specific there. There's not going to be one kind. There's not going to be one specific dominant design. I think there'll be a few, and it'll kind of, it doesn't need to be a moment. It'll kind of be a year or two, and it might happen sooner than we think. In the same way that there was breakthroughs in error correction that went from the kind of 6 nines that are needed for, you know, the 5-qubit code down to the kind of 2 to 3 nines that were needed for the surface code. There's been since other breakthroughs that a bunch of people are aware of that have taken down those numbers further if you have sufficient networking, right? So like there's all kinds of things that you can't predict if you can't see the full, if you can't see the future, right? And so I'm wary about hype. Overpromising is not in our interest, but at the same time, I do think that there will be opportunities for things to move faster than we expect. And I don't know what that looks like yet. I have a guess at what it looks like. We're pretty bullish on our own thing, but the proof is in the pudding. We're going to put it down on the table, or we won't. And we won't be necessarily the only ones to be, everybody's pushing really hard, and there's a lot of resources and a lot of really smart people in this space. So there will be, it'll be really, really fun over the next couple of years to see what that looks like. The hype is an interesting one, because what you find is there's a lot of hype that is ill-informed, right? Like there's some sincere advantages that this technology will have and unlock. And the thing that I'll point to is people tend to overestimate the short term and underestimate the long term, right? So like the long-term consequences of this technology are just transformational. Like it's going to feed into almost all of our high performance needs in the long term, right? And there are needs when you think about information protection or other things where you do need to be thinking long-term now. And so those people should be thinking about quantum, and in which case there's no hype misplaced. It's like, well, think about it, right? There's consequences to these things. But there's also the other side to the hype side is like, okay, well, like the term quantum supremacy, for example, like this is not useful, right? Like it's from a short-term perspective, you can't just say quantum computers are going to solve like all possible challenges. And you know what I mean? Like this is not helpful. And it's just part of the consequence of the attention economy, right? Like people just need to have more attention for the ad revenues on their website. So whatever, we're not playing that game right now. But at the same time, I do think that this is going to be big, and it's going to maybe be sooner than people think because there's so many smart people working on these problems now from so many fronts.
Well, I was an early employee of IBM Quantum, and when we put the first 5-qubit device out, I mean, it was just so amazing. And actually, I didn't expect things to move as quickly as they have. And so I'm constantly reminded that there's just so much innovation and so many smart people, and everybody has their own program. And it's actually kind of, André and I always love news every week because there's so much happening.
Yeah.
I never expected it, kind of like you're saying, there's so many papers. I never expected kind of the breakthroughs that happen every week and the announcements. There's really quite a bit of momentum.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah. So André, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. And I will change my superconducting background.
I mean, there's nothing wrong. That wiring is gorgeous, right? Like that's a lot of, I've had to engineer on that side of the millikelvin fence, and that's it's some pretty wires.
It's beautiful, and I'm glad you're saying there's nothing wrong with it, because before we get to our questionnaire, I'll make one final attempt. What you just said is beautifully summarized in a quote on your website, where you say, "To be here today, delivering on the promise of an entire branch of physics, is a once in a generation privilege. Every time in the past when people have done this, we have shifted the full spectrum of human experience."
Yeah.
Is this era helping with that?
Is what, sorry?
Is the NISC era helping with this? Is this good? Is this, or when are you going to come out publicly? No,
I'm not telling you that. But in terms of, is NISC helping with that? Like commercializing a branch of physics is a real thing. Like if you take a look at human technological developments, that is the history of commercializing physics is technology history, right? That plus the medical side. But basically, people used to fill auditoriums to take a look at magnets, and now it's electromagnetism, something boring, and you plug into the wall, right? It goes from magic to being boring, and that's the process, right? Like that's a good outcome for us. We should put this in the same way that semiconductors, like everybody's so excited about AI and all the software and the rest of it, but this is really a testament to semiconductor physics going mainstream, right? Like commercializing semiconductors. So it is perhaps not a frequent framing, but even just thinking about refrigeration and the Carnot cycle, like this is human history. This is how we can move forward. And tools are always better, right? Like just think about the human path, and like we all live like kings, right? Based upon the strength of having cheap access to commercialized physics. Sorry to be a bit blunt about it, but it's really amazing to be able to see see it coming, right? And like there aren't, like when you take a look at physics, quantum physics is just anomalous. If you take a look at all the branches of physics, and you can maybe say high energy physics is like that, but quantum, you could point to it. You could say this is going to do this and is just coming. It's just going to come. And human ingenuity is such that it is going to, like, we are relentless, right? Well, it'll happen at some point. And so to be able to contribute to it and actually ride this wave, it's like paying kids to eat candy, right? Like, you can't get better than that.
Well, it's always great to learn a little bit more from the part of our ecosystem that chooses to stay a little more silent and work on their big goals. We can't wait to see what will come out of it. To wrap up, the Marcel Bruce quantum questionnaire, 6 rapid fire questions. Stef, your challenge is to answer in 1 word or maybe one sentence. So if you're ready, let's go. Who is your favorite scientist?
Marie Curie.
Marie Curie. Somebody else mentioned her before in Weekly Quantum World Detangled, but she doesn't come up much. Do you have a favorite entrepreneur, since you are at the head of a startup at the end of the day?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. I do think that because I don't think that we should necessarily celebrate only the famous entrepreneurs. If you want to take a look at the history of things, there are so many nameless entrepreneurs that have given rise to so much that we can stand upon, right? And maybe I'll just give a shout out to the nameless entrepreneurs that, that just make stuff happen, right? That have fearless ambition, even if they don't have fame.
I love that, absolutely. What is the quality that you desire most in a scientist?
In a scientist? Probably curiosity.
You've probably answered the next question already, but what is it that you appreciate most about working in quantum technologies?
No, I don't actually think it's curiosity, right? So you asked specifically on scientists, and I didn't restrict it to quantum. From what I love about the culture, and sorry, this isn't a 1-word answer. This isn't rapid fire. I'm sorry, I'm failing at your challenge. For quantum science, I love the ambition. I love it.
And maybe thinking even beyond quantum computing, do you have a favorite application for quantum information science?
I can't wait till we can teleport as a service, but I think chemical simulation is and perhaps its implications for battery technology. That gets me up in the morning.
Related to that, do you have a quantum dream?
Do I have a quantum dream? As in 2 dreams at once?
Okay. Is one of them a nightmare? Do you have a quantum nightmare?
No, I'm not really sure how to answer that question. I'm living the dream. Honestly, it's just amazing how lucky we've been on every possible front. So it's such a privilege. It's such a privilege.
And you're building one, I assume. So the last question might actually be possible. Imagine you wake up tomorrow and you have a universal fault-tolerant quantum computer sitting in your living room. Who do you give it to?
As many people as possible. As many people as possible. I think the dissemination of the technology. Well, no, not tomorrow. If we gave it to as many people as possible, then that upends the financial industry and that makes everybody upset. So that would have to be done very cautiously. But in due course, I think it should be as distributed as widely as possible. Yeah, the navigation of that ramp is an interesting one, right? Who do you give it to? And from an ethics point of view, right? Yeah, I think transparency will be very important there.
It's a big responsibility. Stephanie, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to get to know you and learn more about your company, even so you're shy in talking about it. We hope to see you soon on Twitter or other social media.
Oh! But thank you so much for the invite. This has been fun.
Denise and IonQ, I will change my background for now.
Okay, sounds good. Stephanie, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This concludes the Weekly Quantum World Detangled, Season 4, Episode 1. You are now detangled.